Billionaire CEO screams for help in other language. Why did only a 6-year-old autistic girl understand? Before we begin, comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? And when it's over, be sure to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. She was the most powerful woman in New York, a billionaire CEO with a penthouse view and an empire at her fingertips, but none of it could reach the little boy sitting beside her, silent since the accident that took his father. When modern medicine gave up, she drove 4 hours to meet a man who had given up 2. A former doctor with a past he refused to speak of, and hands that carved hope from wood. What began as a last attempt became a true love story between broken people. And the moment her son finally said the word she'd waited months to hear, it changed everything. The first thing you noticed about Evelyn Chase wasn't her money, it was her stillness. She didn't fidget, didn't blink too often, didn't waste time. Her life had been reduced to precision on calendars, in meetings, and most painfully, at home. Because when her husband died in that car crash, her 8-year-old son, Henry, stopped speaking. Not a word, not a cry, just silence. A silence so thick, even her billion-dollar company couldn't break it. She tried everything. The best specialists, experimental therapies, private hospitals. They all said the same thing. Selective mutism brought on by trauma. He'll speak when he's ready. But Evelyn couldn't wait, not because she was impatient, but because she was terrified that if too much time passed, she'd lose all of him, not just his voice. That's when someone whispered a name over wine at a fundraiser. There's a man in Southridge, used to be a child trauma specialist, lost everything. Quiet guy, but he helped his daughter. Maybe he can help yours? Evelyn didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in desperation. So she drove 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon to the middle of nowhere, pulled up to a weather-beaten house behind a field of yellowed grass, her heels sunk in the mud. Her coat caught the wind. She knocked twice, and the door opened. He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like a man who hadn't let anyone close in years. Plaid shirt, calloused hands, eyes like rain. "I don't take clients," he said. "He's not a client," she replied. "He's my son." He stared at her a long moment, then behind her, to the child in the car seat. "Okay," he said. "Let me try." She didn't know it then. But in that moment, something shifted, not just in Henry, but in her. Because this wasn't going to be another transaction. This was going to be the story that saved her life. She thought she was giving her son a second chance. She had no idea she was about to find her first love. Chapter 1. The Woman Behind the Glass. The first time Evelyn Chase stepped inside Caleb Dawson's workshop, she kept her sunglasses on, not because it was sunny, because she wasn't ready to be seen. The room smelled like cedar and iron. A wood stove crackled in the corner. Hand tools lined the walls like art. All in the center, a long work table scarred with nicks and burn marks, a map of pain and purpose. Cal motioned for Henry to sit. The boy said nothing, just clutched the stuffed bear he'd carried since the funeral. Cal crouched beside him. "Ever used one of these?" he asked, holding up a carving knife, no larger than a butter spreader. Henry didn't look up. Cal waited, not speaking, not pushing, just waiting. Evelyn stood stiffly in the doorway, arms crossed. Her coat was cashmere, her heels impractical for dirt. Her eyes scanned every inch of the room, assessing, calculating. This wasn't how things were done. There were no forms, no diagnoses, no walls lined with diplomas. Only this man, a child-sized stool, and a wooden block. She cleared her throat. "Is this the assessment?" Cal didn't turn to her. "No, this is trust." She almost scoffed. But then Henry reached for the block. With hesitant fingers, he ran his palm across the grain, then gently tapped the edge with his thumb. It was the first movement Evelyn had seen from him all week that wasn't fear. They stayed for an hour. Cal said almost nothing, gave Henry a small piece of sandpaper, showed him how to move with the grain, not against. Henry didn't speak, but he didn't flinch either. When it was time to go, he clutched the block like a lifeline. Evelyn offered payment. Cal shook his head. He comes back. That's all. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the penthouse kitchen. No news playing, no phone buzzing, just the carved block on the table in front of her. She reached out, touched its rough edge, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was falling. The next day, she brought Henry back. She sat on the porch this time, close enough to hear, far enough to pretend she wasn't watching, and she watched. As her son slowly learned the shape of something real, Cal gave him a new tool, this one more curved. Henry traced its shape in the air before trying it. He didn't speak, but when the shaving curled off the wood just right, Evelyn saw it, a flicker in his eye. Recognition, she exhaled, realizing she hadn't been breathing. Later that week, she asked Cal the question she always asked professionals, "What's your plan?" This time, the answer surprised her, to show him that silence doesn't mean he's broken. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, those words echoing. Silence doesn't mean he's broken. She wondered, was it possible she'd been seeing Henry through a mirror of her own damage? And if so, what did that make her? Silence doesn't mean he's broken. Some wounds don't scream. They sit quietly and wait for someone who knows how to listen. By the end of the second week, Henry still hadn't spoken, but every day he picked a new tool from Cal's table without prompting. And once, just once, he smiled. When the shavings curled perfectly, Evelyn saw it through the workshop window, and she cried, quietly, behind her sunglasses, because no one had told her healing would look this small. Later that night, she placed the third carved block on her bedside table. 3 days, 3 blocks, no words, but something was happening, and for the first time in a long time, Evelyn Chase felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Chapter 2. A Boy Who Doesn't Cry. The third time Henry came to the workshop, he brought something with him, a small wooden fox. It wasn't carved. It was a gift shop trinket from before the accident. Evelyn noticed how tightly he held it, tucked in his hoodie pocket like a secret. She didn't ask about it. Cal noticed, too, but he didn't ask either. Instead, he said, "Let's try something round today." Henry nodded just once and reached for a piece of soft pine. That afternoon, Cal watched Henry work for 40 minutes straight. No words, no smiles, but no flinching either. There was a calm in his movements, methodical, focused. It reminded Cal of himself, after Elise died, how he'd spent hours sanding the same piece of wood just to feel something shapeable in his hands. Later, as Henry stood by the window, watching Lily draw chalk on the pavement, Cal finally spoke. "Did you know it's okay to be mad?" Henry didn't look at him. "And it's okay to cry, too." Silence. Sometimes, people think silence means strength, but I think it means you're holding too much. Still, no response. But Henry turned the fox over in his hand. That night, Evelyn lingered longer than usual. She stood by the porch as Henry and Lily shared a juice box on the swing. She looked at Cal. "You never ask him questions." Cal shrugged. "He gets asked questions everywhere else." She paused. "You think he's afraid to speak?" Cal shook his head. "I think he's waiting for someone to listen long enough without expecting answers." They sat on the steps, shoes touching. A careful intimacy. "When my husband died," she said, "I thought the hardest part would be sleeping alone." She looked out toward the trees, but it was eating dinner across from a child who wouldn't look at me. I felt like I was failing in every direction. Cal didn't reply, just nodded, and let the silence do the holding. Later that week, something changed. Henry was drawing with Lily under the oak tree. Evelyn stood nearby, arms crossed, watching like she always did. more protector than mother. Cal joined them quietly. "Want to see something?" he asked Henry. The boy looked up. Cal pulled out an old block from under the porch, a carving of a carousel horse unfinished, faded, with initials etched faintly into the base. E.D. made this with someone special. A long time ago. Henry stared at it, his fingers twitching slightly, then whispered, barely audible, "Pretty." Evelyn turned sharply. Her breath caught, but Cal didn't react. He simply nodded. Yeah, she thought so too. Later, Henry refused to speak again, but Evelyn didn't care, because now she knew. He still had words inside. "I think he's waiting for someone to listen long enough, without expecting answers. There's a kind of love that doesn't push. It just waits at the door until you're ready to walk back out." That night, Evelyn sat by her window. She pulled out the old fox figurine from Henry's backpack, turned it in her hands. It was chipped at the ear. She almost threw it away, but then she placed it beside her wine glass and whispered, "Pretty," and smiled. Chapter 3. The Language of Wood. By the 4th week, Henry didn't need directions anymore. He came into the workshop, washed his hands, picked out his wood, and started carving. No greetings, but no hesitation either. Cal had taught him the names of the tools silently, one by one. A nod, a raised brow, a gentle correction of grip, and Henry remembered everything. Chisel, gouge, mallet, V-tool. Evelyn began staying longer, first in the car, then on the porch, then by the workbench. She didn't hover. She simply existed near them. And for the first time in her life, she felt useful doing nothing. One evening, Lily tugged at Evelyn's sleeve. "You ever try carving?" Evelyn raised a brow. "Me." Lily handed her a scrap piece. "Try it. You can't mess up. It's just wood." Evelyn laughed, surprised by the sound of it. She took the carving knife clumsily, pressed too hard, then too soft. Cal glanced at her from across the table. "Go with the grain," he said gently. "Not against." Evelyn nodded, but she knew they weren't just talking about wood. That night, Henry stayed behind with Lily, painting wooden foxes. Evelyn lingered by the fire pit with Cal. They sat across from each other, sipping cocoa like teenagers, unsure if they were on a date. "You always this patient?" she asked. Cal smirked. "Only with the people who need it." "I don't need patience." "Then why are you still here?" Silence. Then, because for the first time, "I don't feel like a machine." The wind blew. The fire crackled. Cal looked at her differently now, not as the CEO, but as a woman who'd forgotten she was allowed to feel. A few days later, Evelyn found Henry sketching. Not animals, not toys, but hands. Cal's hands. Her hands, holding tools, holding hope. No mouths, just fingers curved in quiet understanding. She pressed a kiss to his forehead. He didn't flinch. Later that night, she walked through her penthouse, turning off lights. The silence didn't ache the way it used to, because now she understood. Some silences are healing, especially the kind filled with sawdust, soft voices, and the smell of pine. Go with the grain, not against. Healing doesn't ask you to push. It asks you to follow what feels true, even if it leads somewhere you don't recognize. At the end of the week, Cal handed Henry his own toolbox. Nothing fancy, just a small wooden case with his initials carved on the lid. H.C. Henry traced the letters, then very softly, "Thank you." Cal looked at Evelyn. She looked back. Neither of them said a word, but both knew what it meant. Chapter 4. Secrets. Carved in silence. The power went out in Southridge on a Thursday night. Lightning split the sky in soft blue veins, thunder rolling behind it like a slow drum. Lily squealed in delight. Henry didn't even blink. They'd grown used to weather in this town. Storms that came fast and disappeared faster. Cal lit candles in the workshop, setting them along the shelves and the windowsill. The light danced off the tools and unfinished carvings. Evelyn stood by the door, soaked from the dash from her SUV, her blouse clinging to her shoulders. "Sorry, I'm late. Traffic in the city." Cal waved her off. "You're here." He handed her a towel. "Power's out." But the carving never stops. Henry and Lily worked quietly on their blocks by lantern light. Evelyn joined Cal at his table, picking up her half-finished piece, a rough shape of a horse that looked more like a potato. She sighed. "I was never good with my hands." "That's not true," Cal said. "You just never gave them a chance to slow down." The storm outside grew louder. The workshop grew quieter. And then Evelyn said something she hadn't meant to say aloud. "When I was 9, I used to hide under my dad's desk at work." Cal looked at her. "Why?" "Because it was the only time he wasn't yelling." She kept carving. "He built Chase Biomed from the ground up. Everyone thought he was brilliant. But at home, he only knew how to manage people, not love them." A pause. "I used to count how many minutes I could sit still before he noticed I was there. Longest I made it was 37. Cal didn't interrupt. He just kept carving beside her. The sound of blade against wood was oddly comforting, like a heartbeat made of cedar. "My mom left when I was 12. I didn't cry. I just started building things, schedules, goals, a life where no one could walk away unless I let them." "And did it work?" Cal asked gently. She looked up at him. "I became CEO at 28. And when my husband died, I had everything in place. A beat, except how to help a little boy who wouldn't speak." Cal reached for something under the bench, a small box. Inside, a carving, a carousel horse, weathered, detailed, smooth, from years of being held. "My wife carved this with me the year Lily was born," he said. "Elise loved movement. She said grief is like a carousel. It spins you so fast, you can't tell if you're dizzy or dying." He smiled faintly. "After she died, I kept fixing it, over and over, even when it didn't need fixing." Evelyn touched the mane gently. "Do you ever stop blaming yourself?" Cal's voice went low. "Only when I'm watching your son get better." The rain softened. Lily fell asleep, curled against a pile of shavings. Henry yawned, then carefully placed his latest carving, 2 small hands, touching on the shelf. He didn't speak, but he looked at Evelyn with something new in his eyes, recognition. She smiled, and for once, didn't rush to fill the silence. Later, as they locked up, Cal handed Evelyn a blank block of wood. "What's this?" she asked. "For the thing you've never said. Carve it." "I wouldn't know where to start. That's the point." She held it all the way home, pressed it against her chest like a keepsake, not because it was beautiful, but because someone had finally seen the space inside her she thought was invisible. "Do you ever stop blaming yourself?" "Only when I'm watching your son get better. Sometimes the only way to forgive your past is to walk beside someone else's healing long enough that it softens your own." That night, Evelyn sat by her bedroom window as thunder whispered across the sky. She picked up the block, ran her thumb along the edge, and whispered, 37 minutes, then began to carve. Chapter 5, My Daughter's Laugh. The old carousel hadn't spun in years. Tucked between a shuttered library and an antique shop, it sat like a relic from a town that had stopped believing in magic. Cal passed it often, but never stopped. Not since Elise, not since Lily fell off the pony and cried for her mother, not knowing she was never coming back. But this Saturday, Lily begged, "Please, Daddy, just once. I'll clean the whole porch." Cal sighed. "It's broken." "Sweetheart, then fix it." "You fix everything." Evelyn watched the exchange from the bench, half smiling. She's persistent. Cal smirked. She gets it from her mother. He didn't expect Evelyn to say, quietly, "So does mine." They shared a look. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement, maybe, or grief, wrapped in gentleness. By afternoon, The four of them were inside the carousel pavilion. It smelled like dust and time, light filtered through faded stained glass. The horses were chipped and still, their manes tangled, colors dull. But Henry's eyes lit up. He walked slowly around the platform, brushing his fingers along the rails. No words, just wonder. Evelyn followed at a distance. He used to be terrified of these. She whispered to Callie. He's not terrified now, Cal replied. It took an hour, 2 cans of WD-40, and Lily, shouting encouragement like a tiny drill sergeant. But eventually, Cal got the thing to groan, then creak, then move. The carousel spun, slowly, then a little faster, and suddenly Lily laughed, loud, free, glorious. It echoed through the space, like music Evelyn hadn't heard in years. Henry smiled. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he laughed, too. Evelyn froze, her chest clenched. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them, not because she was sad, but because she'd forgotten what that sound felt like. Henry's laugh, high and unsure, like a violin string being used for the first time, but real, so very real. She sank to the nearest bench, covered her mouth, and wept. Cal sat beside her without a word, just handed her a worn handkerchief. She took it gratefully. You ever forget what your child sounds like? She asked, choking on the words. I used to think I'd never hear Lily laugh again, he said. Now she laughs loud enough for 2. They watched the kids spin, and for a moment, Evelyn Chase, the woman who once closed multi-million-dollar deals over cocktails and screens, sat barefoot on a dusty bench, mascara smudged, heart cracked wide open, and felt joy. Not success, not progress, just joy. Later, Cal brought out a speaker. Soft jazz floated into the space. Henry reached for Evelyn's hand, guided her onto the platform. They didn't dance. They just stood and let the world move around them. He laughed, too. Some healing sounds like a whisper, some sounds like a scream. But sometimes, healing sounds like your child laughing for the first time in months. As the sun dipped, Evelyn helped Henry off the carousel horse. He leaned his head against her shoulder, tired but peaceful. Thank you, she whispered into his hair. She didn't expect a reply. She didn't need one. But Henry nodded, small, firm, and Evelyn broke a little more inside, in the best way. That night, she texted her assistant, cancel next week's meetings. I'm staying longer in Southridge. The reply came fast. Understood. Should I reschedule the board vote? Evelyn stared at the screen, then typed back, no. Let them vote without me. And for the first time in her life, she let go of something that didn't love her back. Chapter 6, The Fall of Dr. Dawson. The rain came hard that night. It didn't drizzle, it poured, as if the sky couldn't hold the weight of the day any longer. Evelyn arrived with Henry in tow, soaked from the dash from her car. Cal opened the door, took one look at her drenched blouse, raised an eyebrow. You know, we own towels in this house, right? She smiled. I like the dramatic entrance. The kids settled into Lily's room for board games and stories. The adults stayed in the kitchen. Cal poured coffee. Evelyn sipped slowly. Something hung in the air between them. Not quite tension, not quite safety. You always drink coffee this late? She asked. I used to, he replied, when I stayed up waiting for a pulse, a beat. When I was still Dr. Dawson. She'd heard that name before, once, in whispers, on articles that were quickly scrubbed from the internet. You never talk about it, she said softly. Would you? The thunder cracked. He walked to the window, arms folded. She died in her sleep. Evelyn blinked. Your wife? No, a patient, 7 years old. She'd been improving for months. I thought we were winning. His voice cracked. I told her parents to take her home for Christmas. I promised them she was strong enough. He didn't cry. He just breathed like the air itself was made of nails. They found her in the morning. No pulse, no cause, just gone. Evelyn stood frozen. The board revoked my license within 6 weeks. Lawsuits followed, settled out of court. But I'd already resigned before they could fire me. He turned, eyes sharp. I wasn't just grieving Elise. I was grieving the version of myself who thought he could save anyone. A pause. So I built a shed, started carving wood, because wood doesn't die in the middle of the night without warning. Evelyn walked to him, carefully. "Cal, don't pity me," he said. "Just understand, I stopped trying to help people because I couldn't handle breaking another parent's heart. But you didn't," she said gently. "You're healing mine." They stood in silence for a long while. The rain softened. The fire flickered. And then he said, "There's something I want to show you." They climbed the attic stairs. The door was stiff, untouched for years. Inside, dust and shadows, boxes, photos, a broken crib in the corner, and on the far wall, hundreds of drawings, not of his daughter, not of Patience, but of carousel horses, dozens, each slightly different, each with a name written beneath it. One name repeated over and over, Maya. Evelyn stepped closer. "Was that her?" Cal nodded. "She was the last one I lost. You kept drawing her because she didn't get to grow up, but I could still grow the memory of her." He handed her a box. Inside, a sealed letter, yellowed, unopened. "From her parents?" he said. "They wrote it after the funeral. I've never read it." "Why not?" "Because if they forgave me, I didn't deserve it. And if they didn't, I already agreed with them." Evelyn held it for a long moment, then looked at him. "May I?" Cal nodded. She opened it. "Dr. Dawson, you gave us 6 more months than anyone promised. You gave her Christmas. You gave us hope. We forgive the outcome because we remember the effort." Tears welled in his eyes. He covered his mouth. Finally, sat down on the attic floor and wept. Evelyn knelt beside him. No speeches, no comfort cliches, just her hand on his shoulder and the knowledge that this moment, this cracking open, was sacred. Later, she walked him down the stairs. He looked tired, but lighter. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "Not running. You never ran from Henry. Maybe I needed someone to show me it was safe to stop. We forgive the outcome because we remember the effort. The ones we carry longest aren't the ones we couldn't save. They're the ones we stopped forgiving ourselves for trying." That night, Evelyn placed the letter copy on her nightstand. Next to it, the first fox Henry ever carved, and beside that, a small drawing of a carousel horse. The caption in Henry's handwriting, "For Mr. Cal, because you didn't stop." Chapter 7, his first word. The fog settled over Southridge like a soft veil. It was the kind of morning that felt suspended in time, where breath came in clouds and footsteps disappeared into dew-covered grass. Henry was quieter than usual, not in a sad way, more focused. He stood by the woodpile, running his hand across each log like he was choosing a story. Lily tugged his arm. "Come on, let's go see the baby foxes by the creek." He hesitated, then nodded. Cal and Evelyn stood on the porch, sipping coffee. They watched their children disappear down the path behind the house. "He's opening up," Cal said. Evelyn nodded. "It's not just with you anymore. He's letting her in, too." A long pause. Then she whispered, like a confession, "I'm scared I'll lose it." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because he's not just surviving. Now he's choosing." The scream came fast, high-pitched, Lily's voice. Then the thud, then silence. They ran. Evelyn's heart raced ahead of her feet. They found Henry kneeling beside Lily, who'd slipped on the wet rock near the stream. She was crying, not badly hurt, just scraped and scared. But Henry was frozen, hands shaking, eyes wide. Evelyn reached for him. "Baby, it's okay. It's okay. She's okay. But he didn't move, didn't blink. His chest rose in panic until Cal knelt in front of him. Henry, look at me. No response. You're safe. She's safe. You're not in danger anymore. Still frozen. Then, the word was small, breathy, but it broke the world open. This, Henry said again, louder, clearer. He pointed at Lily's cut. This is like when Daddy, his voice cracked. He choked on the words, but he was talking. Evelyn fell to her knees, arms around him, not squeezing, just holding. I hear you, she whispered. I hear you, baby. Henry buried his face in her neck. They walked back slowly, Lily holding Cal's hand, Evelyn carrying Henry like he was glass and gold at once. She couldn't stop crying, but she didn't care because he spoke. That evening, Cal set a plate of cookies in front of Henry. You like peanut butter? Henry looked at him. My dad liked peanut butter. Cal nodded. Smart man. Henry smiled. Just a little. That night, Evelyn sat beside her son as he slept. She ran her fingers through his hair and whispered, "Thank you for trusting the world again." Then her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. You're being voted out next week. They think you've lost your edge. She stared at the screen, then closed it, and looked at her son, still breathing, speaking. Maybe I lost something, she whispered, but I found what matters. This, one word, one syllable, a single breath that says, I'm still here. The next morning, Henry asked to carve alone. He chose a soft cedar block, sat beside the fire, and began to shape something round. When Evelyn peeked later, she saw what it was. A mouth, smiling. Chapter 8, Betrayal in the Boardroom. Evelyn hadn't been inside the Chase Biomed Tower in 46 days, but the second she stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, it hit her. The scent of power, filtered air, glass, polished ambition, and beneath it all, judgment. Julian met her in the hallway, polite, pressed suit, cautious eyes. You look rested. Don't lie, she said flatly. I know I'm about to be burned alive. He sighed. You were gone too long, Ev. The board feels you abandoned the mission. The mission, she echoed. Right. Inside the boardroom, 12 faces turned as she entered. Most were ones she'd hired. Now, they stared like she was a ghost. Thank you all for gathering, she said. Voice steady. Let's not waste time. I know what this is. A man. Near the end. Derek King, VP of Development, spoke first. You've been out of state for nearly 2 months. Silent. No contact. No quarterly call. No statement on Q2 projections. Evelyn raised her chin. I was caring for my son. He hasn't spoken since the accident. A long silence. Then someone murmured. And now he has. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. So your absence paid off, Derek said. But at what cost to the company? They called it a vote of leadership reallocation. Not a firing. Not an ousting. Just a polite knife in the back. 9 votes to 3. Julian was one of the 3. He looked gutted, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood slowly. I built this place from my father's ashes. I turned it from trauma into triumph. A pause, but somewhere along the way, I forgot that building people is more sacred than building empires. She met each of their eyes. If protecting my son means I lose my crown, then I never needed it in the first place. She walked out without a shred of regret, not because it didn't hurt, but because for the first time in years, her son was speaking, and no title on earth could compete with that. Outside, her phone buzzed again. Cal. Hey! Henry wants to show you something. She smiled. I'm on my way. Back in Southridge, Henry was in the shed, carving. He looked up as she walked in, cheeks dusted with sawdust. Did you win your meeting? Evelyn knelt beside him. No. Sweetheart. I lost. A pause. But I think I won something better. He handed her a new carving, A small figurine, a woman her kneeling beside a child. No crown, just arms wide. She held it to her chest like a medal. That night, Cal found her in the workshop. She was staring at the shelves, eyes red. "They voted me out," she whispered. "Then they finally made room for the version of you that matters." He reached for her hand. "The world lost a CEO today," he said, "but Henry got his mom back. If protecting my son means I lose my crown, then I never needed it in the first place." The things you let go of. When you finally remember what you were holding on for. They didn't kiss, not yet, but they stood close. And for the first time, Evelyn didn't feel like she had to lead. She just had to be held. Chapter 9. Letters I Never Sent. The night was warm and still. A rare calm settled over Southridge, the kind where even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Henry was asleep. Lily, too. Cal was in the workshop, sanding the frame of a swing he was building. Evelyn sat on the edge of the guest bed, a shoebox open at her feet. Inside, letters, dozens, none mailed, all written in the months after her husband's death. She picked up the one addressed, "To the man I lost." The ink was smudged, not from water, from her hands, the day she dropped it, shaking too hard to pick it back up. She unfolded it now. Read it aloud in a whisper. "I don't know how to be a mother without you. I don't know how to be anything. I'm angry you left, but more angry that you believed I could do this alone. You were wrong. I'm not strong, but I'm trying." She stopped, pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I forgive you." She burned that letter in Cal's fireplace, watched the smoke rise, then wrote something new. "Dear Evelyn, you are doing it, and your son is healing, because you chose presence over performance. You chose heart over habit. You are becoming." That same night, Cal sat on the porch with an envelope he hadn't opened in years. Not Maya's letter, but one from Elise, written the week she found out she was sick. "If you're reading this, I've already made you promise to keep going. I know you'll want to shut the world out, but please, Cal, let someone in. Let someone help you breathe again. I loved you, but you are allowed to love again." He folded it slowly, then stepped inside. Evelyn was curled on the couch, barefoot, wearing one of his old flannels. He handed her the letter. "She told me to find someone who would help me breathe again." Evelyn looked up, eyes shining. "Can you breathe now?" Cal sat beside her, touched her cheek. "Only when you're in the room." They didn't speak for a long while, just held the silence between them like something sacred, not heavy, not empty, but whole. Later, Henry padded into the room, sleepy. Holding a folded paper, he climbed onto the couch beside Evelyn, handed it to her. She unfolded it. A drawing of 3 people, her, Henry, Cal, all standing beneath a tree, and next to it, in his shaky handwriting, "You are safe now." She covered her mouth. Tears fell freely, not from grief, but from arrival. "You are safe now." Not all love stories begin with a kiss. Some begin the moment someone tells you, you can finally rest. That night, Evelyn kissed Henry's forehead and tucked the drawing into her journal. She glanced toward the porch and knew she didn't just find someone to help her son, she'd found someone to help her come home. Chapter 10. The boy who called her mom. The school buzzed with soft chaos, paper crowns, lukewarm cider, art taped to the walls with names scrawled in crayon. Evelyn stood just inside the doorway, clutching Henry's hand like it was the only solid thing in the room. He didn't pull away. He hadn't pulled away in weeks, but tonight, there was something else in his posture. Confidence. Lily dashed ahead. Cal followed, with a camera around his neck, grinning like someone who used to dread these nights and had finally found the reason not to. "Come on," Lily called. The art's down the hall. Evelyn let Henry lead. They passed paintings of sons and families, stick figures with triangle dresses, messy love letters in marker. Then Henry stopped. There it was, his drawing, a wooden workbench, 3 people standing beside it, one with long hair, one with a beard, one small, with a chisel in his hand. Underneath, it read, "My family." Her breath caught, but the real blow came when she leaned closer, because someone, Henry, had written it in his newest, clearest handwriting. Dad, me, Mom. The world blurred. Time stopped. Cal's hand found her back, steadying her. She turned to Henry. "Sweetheart, what did you write?" He looked up, eyes steady, voice soft. "You're my mom now." She couldn't speak, not for a full minute. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she knelt, pulling him into her arms. "You can call me whatever you want," she whispered, "but this is the greatest gift of my life." Behind them, parents passed. Some noticed, most didn't. But Cal, he saw everything. And for the first time since Elise, he felt complete. Later that night, they drove home under a sky full of stars. Henry leaned his head on Evelyn's shoulder. Lily fell asleep, with her mouth open and one boot halfway off. Cal glanced at Evelyn from the driver's seat. "You okay?" "I'm not sure this is real." "It's real. He called me Mom." Cal, he sees what we already knew. At home, Henry brushed his teeth without prompting, crawled into bed. And before Evelyn turned off the light, he asked, "Can I carve something tomorrow?" "Of course. What do you want to carve?" "A heart, but not like the Valentine ones." "Then how?" He thought, then smiled, "Like the ones that grow back." She kissed his forehead and finally understood. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a loop, a circle, sometimes shaped like a small hand in yours, a wooden fox on the shelf, or a boy brave enough to love again. Like the ones that grow back. Not every broken thing stays broken. Some cracks let in light. Some hearts don't just heal. They remember how to grow. Downstairs, Cal waited on the porch. Evelyn joined him. No words, just the soft breath of summer between them. She leaned into his shoulder. "We're not broken people, are we?" He shook his head. "No, just people who had to learn how to hold each other better." And in the quiet that followed, they kissed. No rush, no music, just truth. The sound of healing. The penthouse was quiet, not the cold kind of quiet, but the kind that comes after a storm. The silence that knows its name again. Evelyn stood barefoot in her living room, running her hand along the glass table, where she used to sign contracts worth millions. Dust clung to the corners. She didn't bother wiping it. There was no one here to impress, no empire to polish, only memories, and a woman who had walked away from the world's idea of success to finally feel like she belonged in her own life. She picked up the framed plaque, Forbes Top 10 Women in Biotech, smiled, then placed it back on the shelf, like a book she'd finished. Some stories don't need sequels. Back in Southridge, the sun warmed the porch. Henry sat beside Cal, chiseling into a fresh piece of pine. Lily swung, giggling with bare feet, high in the air. Evelyn stepped outside with lemonade and paintbrushes. "You boys ready to finish the swing?" Henry looked up and smiled. "Only if I get to paint the heart." She walked to Cal, wrapped her arms around him from behind. He leaned back into her. "Content. Remember the first day we met?" she whispered. "You mean when I told you I don't work with billionaires? And now?" "Now," he said, turning to kiss her hand, "I work with my family." The swing was finished by sunset, painted with vines, foxes, and a small red heart in the corner. Henry's heart, the kind that grows back. Later that night, Evelyn tucked him into bed. He held her wrist before she left the room. "Are you still my mom if I get sad again?" Her eyes welled. She kissed his forehead. "Especially then, sweetheart, especially then. We spend so much of our lives chasing wholeness, trying to become someone impressive, unbreakable, unforgettable. But sometimes The most powerful story isn't about who you become. It's about who stays when you fall apart, who waits in silence until you're ready to speak, who teaches your hands to shape joy again. And sometimes it's a little boy calling you mom with a heart that finally remembers how to hope. If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts below. What moment made you pause? What part felt like it was written just for you? We'd love to know. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this story? Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell to follow all our latest stories. And don't miss out. Click here to watch more now.